Welcome back to the shop. Today we have the definition of the race to the bottom. This is what under $400 is going to get you in the Core XY ecosystem from Elegoo. This is going to be the Elegoo Centauri Carbon, and I'm going to take my first look at it and tell you if I like it or not. First in the box, imagine a piece of foam. I already removed it, but we have some paperwork. Then we also have a nice big sheet of actual glass. And there we have it. Typical Elegoo packaging, very nice. We have thick foam on every side of this printer, even right here at the bottom of the box. Yeah, the packing is absolutely top notch. But is the printer the same? Let's find out. On top right over here, we have a thick piece of foam. Let's try to pull it out. We can also see we are pulling up a box, another piece of foam, some more foam, and that's going to be it. Right over here we have the extruder, which is going to be zip tied with this thing, so we need to remove this part. Here we have it, the Elegoo Centauri Carbon. The only thing we are missing is going to be the screen, and we have some tape right over here. Let's remove that. Snipping the filament, removing the cardboard box, and this is probably the fastest unboxing I have ever done on a 2D printer like this. The only thing that we need to mount right now is going to be the screen. The top side is a piece of glass. We can also see that the top side has some felt pads. This is going to keep away the rattling. So I think if we are going to put it on there, yeah, it's pretty fine. Let's open up this box, and in this box we probably have the screen. We have our side mounted spool holder. We have the most ridiculous amount of filament I have ever seen, and then we have the power cord. Filament spool holder probably turns in like that. Right over here we have a little piece of tape with a ribbon cable, which is going to be for the screen. The cable is on. Now we are going to slide it on, remove it, and the printer is ready. All under, I would say, 5 minutes of opening the box and getting it at a state that we can power it on. This is going to be the build plate. It looks like it is double-sided, and I have to say the quality right now, it is looking really sturdy. We have a less structured one over here. This is one that is more going to be textured. This is apparently for PLA, TPU, ABS PETG, carbon fiber, and this is a PLA only plate. Probably has very decent adhesion. Let's get that plate in, and this is going to be the maximum range of the door. Not really happy with this. This is not wide enough in my opinion. It's just shy over 90 degrees of an angle, so I can definitely see people already working on a mod to open your door further than this. So this is going to be the print head. Looking inside, it is looking really interesting. We have one motor right over here, so the lead screws of the Z-axis is probably powered by one motor. It's going to be the one there over in the back. There are going to be a bunch of belts right underneath. Then we have a little poop chute right over here, a little silicone brush, and one thing that I found really interesting is going to be this part right over here. This is the actual part cooling, which is really neatly and tightly worked in together. So this is going to be the jet that is going to cool off your part. We obviously also have one right here in the print head. And then we have our Core XY motors, which are actually pretty beefy. The ones on the Prusa Core one are about half the size of the one that Elegoo is using. I can also see there is a camera right here in the corner with a little thingy that looks like it is an LED light. Then we have our cable management, nothing special. We are using these linear rods on the Y, and we are using the linear rods on the X axis. Those are pretty thin. And then right over here in the back, this is going to be the fan that is going to do the part cooling with the interesting shape that we have seen on the inside. And this is going to be your extraction fan, and we could see on the other side there was some kind of a filter in front of it. We have our poop chute right over here, and then right over here we have our power cord. Apparently we have to unlock the heated bed. If we look up close, we can see some arrows pointing to the bolts that we need to remove. 2 over there and probably 1 over there. For the USB, I like it. It is nice in the middle of the printer. It is not in the way or anything like that. So yeah, I think it's a good place to put your USB stick in it. Another interesting point I can see, there is a little connector right over here. So they have been preparing this printer for an AMS. It is not out right now. They are working on it, but it should be coming out pretty soon, I guess, somewhere around September or October. The chamber is free of junk, and now it is going to do a self-checking. Let's give it a start. First thing I can notice during the self-check, we have some filament coming out of the nozzle, so this has been test printed at the factory. Alright, the self-checking is done, and it took way longer than it took for me to unbox the whole thing, plug it in and power it on. It took over 50 minutes to do all the checking and the bed leveling. What I could see, the bed leveling is done with the nozzle. Another thing I can see, it is bloody dark in that space. I don't see any light except for that dinky little white ball in the corner with the webcam. So let's dig into the menus and see if we can turn it on. So it does indeed look like this is going to be the only point of light, and this is just a little plastic white cover with an LED in there. I'm going to be highly disappointed if this is the only light source in this complete printer. So self-check completed. It looks like the printer is doing nice. We have a little light button. It is only this little dinky light right over here. This is as close as useless as I ever seen an LED light implementation in a 3D printer. So it's safe to say that they did some cost cutting and they did it on the LED. So we can see right over here, this is probably the build chamber temperature. We are at 22 degrees. We have a nozzle temperature, it is right now at 36 and a bed of 39. We have a Wi-Fi icon. If I push on it, nothing really happens. If I push on the nozzle, we can change it out. So it looks like the main screen is just going to be a shortcut to whatever you need to make it do its thing. Then we have our ventilation option. It looks very similar to the Elegoo resin printer lineup. The menu is very similar to that one. So I'm going to connect to my network and I will circle back. We are connected to the Wi-Fi. We have a green symbol right over here and here is my IP address. I'm going to push it in. I'm going to see if it's going to connect me to any kind of a interface so I can do the whole thing over the internet. And it indeed looks like we are met with some kind of an interface from Elegoo. It doesn't look like Clipper, so they are definitely using something else. There is no fluid or anything like that. And there is very little functionality I can find right here in the screen, except for homing every axis, which I'm going to do right now, and probably to start some files. So there is some file history going on. So this is a very stripped down, a very basic implementation of what we can see on the mainsail or fluid. It is probably not even running Clipper, apparently, allegedly, I don't know. So for the filament, we are going to use Conjure filament. It is a dual silk one, and we are going to see how well this is going to run on this puppy. So we have a filament runout detector right over here. We have our spool holder right up there. Let's feed it through the printer. We can see an LED pop up that there is filament present. Loading filament, we have right here in the menu button an extruder section. I'm going to load it at 250C. And we're going to do a little Benchy to see how well this thing is printing. So what we can see right now, it is over the poop bucket and it is purging the nozzle with filament. And here we have it, our first poops of the Elegoo Centauri Carbon. And like we can see, they loaded up the printer with filament at the factory with some kind of a white. We can see it right over here. Time to load up a Benchy. Right over here, we have our Benchy. We can choose what kind of a plate we have. We have a side A and a side B. Not sure what is going to be the difference, probably going to be a Z offset difference between the two. Then we can select our time-lapse photography, whatever the hell, so the time-lapse, and then we can select or deselect the leveling option. I'm going to select it and see what is going to happen when we push that button. Not gonna lie, I was hoping it was going to do a bed mesh, but locally, it's called camp, I guess, at Clipper. It is not, it is doing a full bed mesh probing. Not sure it's because I pushed the leveling button or it is just not a feature that is included in this print. Can't lie, I'm a bit disappointed. This is going to take forever for this printer to even start to do a print that is going to be as big as this. And here we have it, our first Benchy on the Elegoo Centauri Carbon. First thing I can say, it is not looking like absolute garbage, which is great. We can see a little bit of VFA going on right over here, nothing too bad. We can also see the same thing going on right over here. So we definitely have some VFAs on this machine. But yeah, the overall print quality of this machine is not too bad. 50-minute Benchy on a €350 machine. Crazy, right? I also showed you the footage of the camera that is going to film the stuff that you're going to tape. The LED right here in the corner is so weak and pathetic, you can barely see what is going on with your printer. So there is definitely an upgrade needed on the LED lighting system. So right now we know So it runs Benchies. It's time for some more files to test this printer out. So while I'm doing the new input shaping, we can also see there is a little lever right over there. So that lever is going to be for the filament color that we don't really need right now because there is no MMU system in this printer to be seen. So yeah, we have a lever color. Another thing I could see when the bed was moving up and down is that the back lead screw has a little bit of a wobble in it. Not sure if there is any kind of a wobble mitigation going on right here in this arm. If this is going to be a hard mounted surface, then we could have some Z issues. Not sure, we will have to do some more testing. This thing right now is booking it. So right over here we have a little button, and if we push this one, it is now set at Ludicrous. Then we have 3 other modes, so I'm going to set it at silent right now. And I'm going to see if that is going to do anything different. And yes sir, it's slowed all the way down. So we can make it go faster and slower just by pushing some buttons. So just for fun, I'm going to leave it at Ludicrous and we're going to see if this is even going to finish the print. This is not tuned for anything. This is just conjure. I raised the temperatures to 230 degrees Celsius because it is a silk, and silk likes it to be a little bit more hot. And here we have it finished in 1 hour and 33 minutes. The bottom of the print is looking decent enough. We had a little bit of a squish right over here. I turned off the setting for leveling. It doesn't do any leveling at all, so it's probably going to take the mesh it has taken before. I also couldn't see the lead screws compensating for the bed, so that is also something we need to check out. So probably better off leaving the leveling part on. Unfortunately, it is going to be very slow because it is not doing local bed meshing. Now let's look at this object. So we can definitely see some ghosting right here behind the letters. We can see some ghosting right over here also. The VFA is acceptable. It is not too terrible. We can definitely see it is struggling a little bit, and we are probably also having some kind of a pressure advance issue right over here. This defect shouldn't be here, so it looks like pressure advanced is not doing the correct job on this filament. Now, all by all, for 1 hour and 33 minutes, this is a very acceptable print. It is, of course, a silk PLA, so you will see every damn defect on it. All right, the Elegoo is chooching along on its second print. I'm going to pull the plug. I'm not going to use a switch, just to avoid the bullshit comments. Whoopsie, a failed print. I'm going to give it a few Mississippis, and then we're going to see if we can recover it. All right, let's plug it back in. And now we're going to see if we can recover. And we have a reminder, a kind reminder, nonetheless, incomplete job detected. Resume. Let's press resume. Did we save the print? It's looking very, very promising. I'm also going to bump up the temperature to 230 like the previous time to get the best surface finish. It's looking great. It looks like it is skipping quite a few layers, unfortunately. So it definitely skipped a few layers in the middle. It is not perfect, but it is working. All right, so we know that is working. Next up is going to be the filament runout sensor. So I have the piece of filament in my hand. Now let's wait it out. We have no more light. The filament is gone. So probably there is some logic that knows how long the buffer tube is. I hope. It's that, or we are going to run out of filament. And there we have it. The printer is pausing. So there is some logic behind it. It is using as much as possible of the filament left in the guide tube. So it seems that the printer is restoring even the snipped filament. So far, I'm pretty happy with the performance of the Elegoo Centauri Carbon. It is really amazing what they can package for 350 euros. This is including taxes and all of it, taxes, shipping, so they have to build it for under 200 euro if they want to earn any money on it, which is absolutely crazy. All right, so everything is working. We are going to make this object finish. Then we are going to change filaments to something else, and then we are going to see what we are thinking about it on this first look. This is what the webcam is looking like inside the Elegoo Centauri Carbon. It is just barely visible enough to see what the hell is happening, let alone that you know what the hell is going on in that build chamber. If you look at it just from the camera, you can see it is absolutely terrible. And right over there, we have the GD Plus 4 with the lighting on. It is night and day difference with the Elegoo Centauri Carbon. This is the Ludicrous Speedy one. This is the new one, and we can see that we have changed up a little bit on the VFA pattern. We got more a bit of that. Yeah, it's a type of noise that is very comparable with the Soval SV08. If you have no clue what I'm talking about, I did a VFA test between all my print farm printers, and it is looking like that. There will be a video right up there for you to watch, but yeah, it is looking like the VFA belt pattern of the Soval SV08. On the side, we can see the same thing. We can see a very fine pitched vibration going on. We also see some ghosting. We can see on the balanced mode that the ghosting is mostly gone from this side over here. So it seems that if we are going to change up the speed settings, that you will suffer in print quality. Also the linear events fixed itself, so it's probably something you better off tuning in your slicer and not doing on that control panel. On the back we can also see we still have some severe ghosting after this opening right over here, so it looks like input shaper still has its work cut out. They need to do better on the input shaping. Also right over here we can see the vibration lines. It is not super terrible, but it is also not looking that hot. Is it acceptable? I think so. For 350 bucks, you are doing better than the Prusa Core one, which is costing you over 1300 euros. So that being said, it's time to load up some ABS filament and try this all over again. The next thing I wanted to test out is going to be ASA filament from Polymaker to see if this printer is capable of doing any hot prints, because there is no internally heated thingy going on, so you are just banking on the heated bed to get it up to a temperature that is good enough to print hotter filaments like an ASA for instance. In the middle of the print I could see that the temperature reached about 38 degrees, which isn't that high. The Prusa Core one does a better job, although that is a smaller printer, and they have done some nifty little design features to make the chamber volume a lot smaller so that the temperatures are going to be higher. And I could see on the Core one that we could reach about 50 C, so this is 10 C lower. ABS probably going to be a little bit of an issue on the Elegoo Centauri Carbon, but still it did pretty good. Now let's look at the print. You can't see it probably because the light is so weak. So to the Elegoo engineer that decided this was a good idea, this one is for you. Now, all jokes aside, I can see it actually managed to do the print, which is mind-blowing. Let's take it out. It releases super easy from the build plate. We did a little bit of a Z offset kind of a thing in the beginning. It was necessary because we were getting too much squish. So the build plate is doing a really good job holding on the object and then releasing it when it cools down. And here we have it. This is going to be ASA from Polymaker. I can say it is looking not that bad. This is actually a pretty good print. The only thing I can see is right in the beginning, for some reason, it's not looking that hot. Now the line that you can see is in correlation with the bottom of this little bucket. The same thing can be seen right here on the hand. As soon as we have done printing this part, we can see the line over here. So this is just because of the speed difference between this printed part and this printed part. This is unfortunately something that is struggling with every printer if you are pushing the limits of your filament flow. This bucket has been printed with 20 millimeters cubed, which is pretty high. Just being able to print 20 millimeters cubed is already pretty impressive, but that also means that any speed difference is going to be very visible right here on the hand. We do see some weirdness right over here, but this could also be in the design. This is not looking like it has anything to do with the printer itself, but still, this is for an ASA print a really good job. So we can see that printing ASA is not an issue, which is pretty mind-blowing. Now the next thing I'm going to test is going to be TPU. Okay, so for the next part we are going to do a TPU print, which is going to be with the brand G-Tech. It's a 95A, so pretty much a wet noodle. One thing I can hear is that the idle sound of this thing is pretty loud. Not sure if it is the chamber that is making it echo more than I'm used to. Time to do an initial test on TPU. If it's going to print TPU, I'm going to be pretty impressed, because not a lot of printers are going to be capable of printing 95A to begin with. So if this printer is going to be capable of doing that, consider me really impressed. TPU, not a problem at all, especially as this is a very clean print. Let's take a closer look. This is a very amazing result. 95A. Yeah, definitely not a bad result on this printer. TPU, definitely not a problem. Now there is carbon in the name. For that we are going to use Zhonghe, which has a carbon-filled PLA. We're going to load it up into the system and look what it is going to spit out. And here we have it. This is going to be the Zhonghe PLA carbon filled, and I have to say it is looking amazing. We have a little bit stringing going on, but yeah, this is easily fixed. The overall finish surface quality of this print is just amazing. It's perfect. Also on the inside you cannot see it, but I can, and it is looking equally as good. So super great print. Alright, it's time to see what we can find inside the printer. First, an observation I want to make is going to be this little spool holder right over here. I looked inside the screen and we have apparently gathered around 12 hours of print time, and I can already see that this part is wearing out. So if this is the result of 12 hours of print time, I suspect this is going to be wearing rather quickly. Is this going to be a problem? I don't think so. You can rotate this thing so you have a fresh side on the underside, and if this really needs to be replaced, you can probably print this yourself. Although I don't know if these parts are going to be available for you to print it yourself. So first of all, I'm going to remove this panel right over here because it looks like there are some secrets behind this little cover. The cover is loose, let's remove it. On the right side, we can find this little thingy right over here. This is probably going to be one of those carbon filters. This is probably something that you can buy separately. We can see on the sides, we have holes for the air to flow freely, and then most of these holes are filled with some kind of a material. These are probably going to be containing any kind of carbon to hold off the fumes when you are doing prints like ABS and ASA that tend to be pretty stinky. We have an extraction fan over here, and then we have this little blower blowing on this plate, which is probably trying to push air onto your object. This is a very low efficient design of how to distribute air. I have felt it at full power. It is pretty much fine. Nothing crazy over here. It is very neat, however, that we are having these replaceable little carbon pads. But to remove these pads, you will need to remove the back cover, and then reassembling it again is not that super easy. It's probably going to be better off if you're going to tilt the printer back like this and do it that way. On another side note, all these holes and the bolts that you're turning in are threaded into plastic. Then we have this little poop bucket thingy. So we have our wiper. This is probably to cut off the filament before you start wiping if it's going to be hardened on your nozzle. And then we have a little flappy thingy right over here. So every time the nozzle is going to park, it is going to push this little flappy. Now, why are they doing this? So all the filament is nicely bunched up before it drops down, so you don't get a bunch of spaghettis potentially blocking off this hole right over here. So simple and nifty design. It seems to be working correctly. Then we have our print cover. You can remove it by pulling on the bottom part, lifting it a little bit. So here are the notches. And then we have a little ribbon cable going on for the fan that you can just disconnect by pulling on it. So here is your front cover and fan combination. Then we have our nozzle. We can see that we have a fan that is off-center from the heat break, but they made this little nifty cover to get all the air over the heat break. Then we have some perforations over here, and we have some perforations over here. It looks like it is not a problem for the heat creep, so that is good news. Then we have our little silicone sock for the nozzle. It was a little bit hard to remove, so here we have the silicone sock. And then we have our nozzle, which is made of some kind of a brass. It is not coated like all the other nozzles we can see. They do some chrome finish on it. They decided to save the cost and don't do it. Now, Is it just me or is my nozzle crooked? I'm going to get my camera nice and straight on there. In my opinion, my nozzle is crooked, but what do you think? So if it's actually going to be the case that my nozzle is a little bit crooked, we have done all the testing with that crooked nozzle. So is it a major problem? No. Could it be better? Probably yes. So let's dive deeper into this printhead. So here we have one of the first problems. There are 4 bolts holding in the front frame. This bolt is already completely stripped out with the wrench that I used because this is torqued like crazy. Not sure why, but this is the solution. Just grab a Torx that is a little bit bigger than the hole. Then we try to jam it in there on the side, push it real hard, and now the bolt is coming out. So this one is properly screwed. Removing the front cover, you have to be careful for the cable on top. Just like that, we have our plastic shroud. Then right over here, we have our 2 connection points, one for the heater and one for the thermistor. And then we have a third one, which is going to be the fan right over here. Then we have 2 bolts to remove the heat break, which I'm going to do right now. So we remove the bolts and now we can gently pry it out. So this is going to be our heat break and nozzle combination. It is starting to look all very similar to what Bamboo is doing. Yeah, so you can just completely remove this and replace it with a replacement one. Probably these are going to be sold separately with the 0.4 tips, the 0.6 and whatever your hard contents. So this is a very easy swap. Once you lower it down, you have easy access right here on your connectors to replace your nozzle. A cool thing we can see, they are using brass inserts right over here, and I can also see brass inserts right over there. So they are learning from the mistakes that GD has made in the past. So it's good to see that they have attention for details by not using those self-tappers. Another thing I can see is right over here there is a little bolt sitting. It looks like this is going to be the adjustment point for tensioning the gears that are going to be inside of here. So if you're not going to have enough grip, this is probably going to be the bolt to put tension on it. If we look at it from this side, we can see there is some kind of a spring mechanism. So this is probably going to be the spring-loaded mechanism for all your filament. We remove the back cover. Right over here we have our connection point. This is looking like an USB connection that is fastened with these 2 bolts, because right over here I can see that connection. It is looking like a USB-C kind of a thing. Then we have our complete daughter board. We have a little heatsink right over here. There is probably going to be some kind of a stepper driver for this stepper motor. So everything I'm seeing right now is very easy accessible, very easy to work on and replace parts when needed. Also right over here we can see they are using the brass inserts. Right over there we also have a brass insert kind of a deal. And then right over here on the bottom we can see a daughter board which is going to be connected by these pins. And then we can see this board is going to be connected to this hot end. So all the connectors are on this board, going to this board, and then do all the magic through this USB cable. So all very modular or very nifty. I like what I see. And then the last bolt before we can look behind the undercover. So like we talked about in the video, right over here we have our motor, which is going to be connected with this belt and this tensioner to the other 2 lead screws. We have a very small power supply over here. It's unreadable what brand they are using. Then we have something that is looking like an SSR. This is probably going to be for the bed heating. And we have our control board over here. These are probably going to be the stepper drivers that they are using for all the XY motors. We can see it over here. We have our X, we have our Y. So these are going to be your stepper drivers. This is looking like a custom board. It is not something I have ever seen on any other type of brand. Then we have a fan right over here. This is going to push air over these stepper drivers. And then we have our USB. We have a little heatsink. This is going to be the rhythm cable that we have installed on this screen. We can see they are using some hot glue for this cable, which is probably going to be the USB-C that we are going to route through the chain to the printhead. So this is going to be that cable. This is probably going to be the power input of this daughter board that we have a lot more connectors. So this is going to be your bed thermistor. Everything is nicely labeled. We can see the letters HBED. So this is going to be routed through this bracket to this board. So this means that this is going to be an AC powered heated bed that is inside the Elegoo CC. Then we have our power input. So this is going to be your AC power. We can see it is connected to this power supply. While we're at it, I'm going to do a quick bolt check, and these are all tight. A good thing to know is we have some spare connectors right over here, so we can power our LED straight from this little power supply. So this power supply is a 24 volt, 4.2 amps, so this is a 100 amp power supply. Everything is nicely tightened. We also have covers right over here for the SSR boards. We are going to check this one really quickly. Yep. Everything is nice and tight on the input. Then we have the output, which is going to be the cable running through the heated bed. And everything is nice and tight, so it is looking really good. Now the funny thing is, I can't see anything that is super cheaply made. They are doing this in-house. They are probably going to do this partially in-house. And then we have a power supply with no brand on, so this is definitely going to be a cheap power supply. But looking at this is the board that is going to power everything, which is going to control everything. We can see that the screen is super slow, so the processor on this thing is probably not that fast. This is going to be the last project I'm going to share with you. It is also printed with the Noizie PLA carbon fiber filled one. And this is going to be one of the next videos I'm working on. This is going to be a water block system that is going to be for the red rig. Another thing we didn't talk about is going to be bed leveling. It is using the nozzle of the print head to probe the bed to see where the variations are in the bed. Unfortunately, because it's not a clipper, we cannot see some kind of a mesh picturing how bad of a taco this bed is going to be. But one thing I'm going to try, I found out right now, is where the load cell is going to be to make that mesh. So a load cell is basically a gauge that is going to measure when a force is applied. Now these days they are moving the load cell to the print head because it is more accurate, because when you are putting the load cells in the bed, it is going to be influenced by the heat of the bed. We can see it on the print, it's like a GD plus 4. It is starting to get problematic when you get in those high filament temperatures. So a good way to know is just tapping the bed, and we can see that the print head is moving without the nozzle touching the bed, which means that the Elegoo Centauri Carbon is using load cells in the bed. So this has been printed in 2 hours and 20 minutes. So this is supposed to be a copper block. So I printed all of these just to test it out before we do the final milling. No complaints right over here. So if you're going to buy this printer for prototyping with PLA carbon fiber, then this is going to be great. Now it's time to give you my first opinion about the Elegoo Centauri Carbon. To be honest, I didn't expect Elegoo to deliver a machine that is as solid as this. Quite surprised about the build quality. Now Elegoo is very known for the build quality. All the printers I ever had from Elegoo were resin printers, and they really are heavily focused on how the outer shell is looking. They stepped away from all the plastics, and we can see the same on the Elegoo Centauri Carbon. Almost every single thing on this printer is going to be made out of metal. I have no clue what this is going to cost for Elegoo to put glass, a front door that is also made from glass, and almost every panel is made out of an aluminum. How the hell they are doing it for 350 euros shipped to my door? It is absolutely crazy. We can also see that inside there is not a lot to complain about. We can see on this boxes right over here, print quality is not going to be the best thing on earth. We can still see the GD Plus 4 nailing print quality, and it is more in line with the Sovol SV08, but it is very serviceable. We have done TPU 95A, which is a wet noodle when you have it in your hand. We did some ASA printing. This is, by the way, for you guys to put in your opinions. And right over here, we have our Benchy, which is also printed at, speeds that you would think 5 years back, what the hell are we doing? Then it is also very clear, carbon fiber filled filaments, if it's going to be a PETG or like in this case PLA, and I even think if we're going to print ABS with the fiber in it, this is just going to be fine. And yeah, there is a lot to love about this printer. There are also some things to not love about it. And the first and only thing in my opinion is going to be it doesn't have clipper. Oh, Elegoo, why? It doesn't have clipper. So it's probably running on Marlin, I guess, because it is that, or it is clipper, or they are doing something proprietary. So it's going to be really hard for you to do any firmware changes. For instance, if you don't like the nozzle or you want to build a new print head. People like me like to tinker, and this is going to limit you very hard on the things that you can pull out of it. Now, if you have the firmware and you can compile it and all of that, it is probably going to be fine. But let's be honest, clipper is so much easier if you want to do any shenanigans with this printer. Now, one thing that annoys me the most, except for the light inside the printer is going to be the opening of the door. We can see the opening of the door. It is not wide at all. I would have preferred to see it go open wider than this. Not sure if anybody is working on a model or anything like that, but I wished this door would open a little bit wider. Then bed mesh leveling, we can see that it is using the nozzle probing the bed. The load cells are in the bed. Very high temperature prints are going to react differently than PLA prints, and I can definitely see that when I'm printing PLA, the offset is going to be different from, let's say, an ASA. Because right now I can see a little bit of an under extrusion, and it is going to be fine right here on this PLA print. This is going to be a common problem with a lot of those load cells in the bed. It is susceptible to the heat. There is no real way around it, except if you are going to use an eddy or a beacon. Now, in this price budget, it is not going to happen. This is more than enough to get you by with a decently enough first layer. Another design feature I like about the Elegoo Centauri Carbon is going to be the part cooling fan. Not the one in the print head, but the chamber cooling fan. It is actually pulling cold air from the outside and pushing it in the printer, not recirculating the air that is going to be in the chamber. It is something I have not seen on other printers. It is super clever. It is actually giving cold air to your print to cool it down instead of recirculating the same hot air in the chamber of this printer. So really cool design feature, and I can definitely see that this is going to be used by other manufacturers when they are going to see how useful it actually is. It is right here on the back. You don't even see it. So yeah, very smart move from Elegoo to pull cold air from the outside into the printer to cool off your objects. Now let's talk about software quickly. I used Orca Slicer. I didn't bother to get the Elegoo Slicer. Orca Slicer is already working perfectly fine. They have a link to the Elegoo thingy that they are doing. The only thing that I could find that was a little bit disappointing is going to be the printer interface. There is a little tab, you push on it. Normally you have a mainsail or a fluid kind of a deal going on. With Elegoo, it is very stripped down. You get the webcam, you can home all your accesses. You can change the temperatures, and that's about it. So no Z-stepping, none of that. No calibrations. This is bare bones as it gets. This is really disappointing, and another showcase why I really would like to see Clipper being just standard on printers like an Elegoo, because right now there is nothing you can do if something goes wrong. Then also what we could see inside is that they are using some injection molded blocks to keep in the bearings where the motors are mounted. The little tube on the side, they all seem to be made of the same material. These are not fiber reinforced, which also makes me believe that this is not a system that I would want to run very hot. Which means that I would not put a heater inside because of the plastics they are using. Normally in printers like the GD Q1 Pro or the GD Plus 4, they're using some kind of a glass reinforced nylon, which is great for high temperatures. This system is not. It seems like they are just using an ABS. And while I think that statement is still very true, we can see the motor mount is glass filled. Same for this mount and the complete Z axis. What isn't filled is going to be the blocks of the X axis or the gantry. So this is going to be your biggest problem point, that the whole X axis isn't glass filled for some reason. Here I have some acetone. Let's look if those bearing blocks of the X axis or the gantry are made of ABS. We got some on there. Let's give it a little wipe, and we can see the side of this block is starting to have residue on it. So we can definitely say, and there is a little bit on this paper towel, this block is definitely made out of an ABS material. Here is a little close-up if you don't believe me. And yeah, for 350 euros, I can see this be a real winner for like a school that tries to teach the little kids of tomorrow how to use 3D printing as a manufacturing process, or just the hobbyists that don't want to shell out a bunch of money. I can also see this being a great first printer. Now we have to test it a lot more than we did right now. I've already told you we are about 12 hours of print time in this thing. So the lights and the operating system are going to be your biggest downsides on this printer. Now on the lights, I have seen on the Reddits, Elegoo is apparently working on something on the new batch to get more light in this printer. They are going to do a strip or something like that. Now, great for the new people. For all the people that are having this Centauri Carbon right now, you are shit out of luck. I have no clue if they are going to retrofit those things into the old systems, if they are going to ship you a better lighting system free of cost, or if you will have to buy it as an expansion kit. We can also see on the Reddit people are already hacking this thing, and we can see some people putting on a riser, and on that riser they are putting some LEDs, and like I told you, there are some ports on the power supply that you can use to power your LEDs if you don't have a clue how to put in a macro to just change the LED settings. It is going to be turned on for 24/7 as long as you turn off the power supply, but in my opinion it's worth it because right now I have some time-lapse footage. Those are really sad to look at, and honestly I think the camera is not that bad. If you have enough light, the camera is not that shitty, but still the lighting situation, they are using tinted panels. These are heavily tinted, one of the most heavily tinted panels out here in the shop, a bit like this Elegoo Jupiter one. The GD+4 is not that tinted. The same thing is going to be true for the Prusa Core one, super heavily tinted, and then that little dinky LED light. Yeah, so those are going to be the downfalls. The paneling, it all seems to be very easy to remove. You can see all the bolts sitting around, so if you ever have to do maintenance on your XY gantry, the panels pop out very easily. They didn't overcomplicate this system, and I think this is going to be the conclusion of this video. They didn't overcomplicate it, however, it is looking really neat, and it seemingly does the job really well so far. So like I said, I wasn't very excited the first time I thought about buying this printer. Now getting it out of the box and having tinkered with it for about 3 days, I have to say this is really a good contender on the entry level of 3D printing that you get right now. All right, that's going to be it. Thank you so much for watching. Also, the members of the channel, you are true legends. Thank you so much for supporting what I do. If you want to become a member, the links will be down below. And if you enjoyed this video, give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. We are so close to 10,000 subscribers, so help me out, push that button. And guys, I see you in the next one.